Hi, my name is Nick, and today I'm going to be discussing an activity that I planned for my event for RPTM 456. My event is the Wilderness Skills Day at Seven Mountain Scout Camp. Seven Mountain Scout Camp is part of the Boy Scouts of America. The two of those are the agency that I will be planning this event for. And the mission of the Boy Scouts of America is preparing young people to make ethical and moral choices that instill the values of the Scout Oath and Law in them. Another thing is we're trying to get the youth to get their Eagle Scout rank, and part of that is earning merit badges, one of which is the Wilderness Survival Merit Badge, which is what this event will be focusing on with the Wilderness Skills Day. The target audience of the event is Scouts, and Scouts can range anywhere from 11 years old all the way up to 18 years old when they age out. However, I specifically am anticipating a younger audience to show up because usually older Scouts don't show up. So I'm imagining anywhere from 11 to 15. And the goal of the event is to teach participants skills needed for surviving in the wilderness and also earn their Wilderness Survival Merit Badge. So the activity that I planned to discuss today is the fire building competition. And this activity basically entails I'm going to teach the kids about how to start a fire, why they would want to start a fire, and the components of fire starting, as well as the safety aspects of it. And then after the explanation and discussion with the kids, I will go into facilitating the actual activity, which is a race where they will be split up into groups and start their own fires, and whoever starts the fire that burns down a piece of twine the fastest wins. All of the goal is just to have a successful fire by the end of the activity. So, first I'll give a brief description of the space needed. As you see, there is not too much space needed for this, or not too much complication needed, as all that really is needed is 3 fire pits, or however many fire pits are needed to accommodate the amount of groups. I'm imagining 5 people in a group, so if you have 15 people, that would be 3 groups of 5, which would necessitate 3 fire pits. And ideally the area that it is facilitated at will have wooded areas surrounding it so that people can get wood for their fires. And the important thing is that the fire pits be at least 10 yards apart. And then if we zoom in on the actual fire pits, this is what they'll need to look like for setup, where you have the fire pit, and inside of that you'll have 2 stakes that come out of the ground, and they want to be 2 feet off the ground with a piece of twine tied in the middle of them that's pretty taut. And that twine, underneath that twine is where the kids will build a fire, and the goal is for their fire to burn that twine, and that is when the competition ends. So, before I get started, the participant outcome objectives of this activity are to identify the 3 different types of wood needed to start and maintain a fire, and I'll discuss those shortly. They want to start a fire that can burn through the twine, and finally I want them to express a commitment to following leave no trace guidelines when starting a fire, and I'll explain that later as well. So first I'll start with a description of the types of wood, and I have those here with me. So there are 3 types of wood. There's kindling, tinder, and fuel. And it's important that the kids understand what these types of woods are because you need that to effectively start a fire. So here is the first kind of wood I have. This is tinder. And tinder characteristically is very small. These are actually, could even be big for some tinder. But they're just small. They snap pretty easily, as you can see here. And they will light very quickly. So whenever you put these down, they should light immediately. Next is kindling, and kindling, as I pull it out, is a little bit thicker, as you can see. So kindling is dry, it's thicker, typically it is less thick than your thumb, is the guideline. And this will be put on top of the tinder immediately after that starts. So you'll burn the tinder, and then once that starts, you'll put the kindling on top, and hopefully that'll start to burn soon. And then we get to fuel, and I have a couple different examples of fuel. These 2 pieces of wood are examples of fuel, and you can see they're pretty thick. This one was cut off, and I found it in my backyard. And these pieces will take a while to burn, and the important thing about fuel is that you want it to produce embers whenever it burns that will keep staying hot for a while and help to burn more wood as you put it on the fire. I have another example of fuel right here. This is a bigger log, and I won't be having the kids actually burn anything like this because this is too big for them, but this is useful in fires because it burns for a long time and it produces a lot of coals that will keep burning on the wood. So those are the 3 types of wood that we're going to discuss, and then I'll have the kids go out and I want them to grab examples of each type of wood. So they're going to go out into the woods and just grab 3 pieces of wood and come back, and I'll, or whoever is leading the activity will tell them if they did found the type of wood or not. And then from there, they'll be split up into groups. And as I mentioned earlier, the groups will be at most, I want to say 5 people. I think it should be a smaller group. So if there's 15 people, that would be 3 groups of 5. And once they're split up into those groups, we'll discuss a little bit more what you need to start a fire outside of wood. And that would be something to start a fire with. So you could use a lighter, you could use flint and steel, but for this activity we'll be using matches. And we'll discuss why you need matches to start a fire, and that's because it's really hard to actually spark anything in nature on its own. So that will be what the beginning of the activity looks like. And then after that, I will explain the activity to them, which once again will be burning down that piece of twine that is set up. And they just need to gather the wood and have it. But before they can actually go gather wood, they first need to take a bucket that will be set next to their fire, and they have to fill it up with water. And that's because of safety. So that will lead us into the safety discussion, where I discuss some injuries that can occur because of fire building, and also just some leave no trace guidelines. And those leave no trace guidelines are pretty easy to follow. Basically, for gathering wood, you just don't want to gather anything off of trees. Everything you gather should be found on the ground, and there should be nothing green on it. So if there's some leaves coming off of it, you don't want to use that. And if there's moss growing on the wood, you don't want to use that. And that's because 1, it's not good for leave no trace guidelines, and 2, it actually won't burn very well. And then once I explain the safety, the leave no trace, and all the fire technique, that's when the kids will go off and actually start gathering their wood and build their own fire. So there is no time limit associated with this, just until the activity ends. So they will go off into the woods and start their own fire, and grab their own wood and come back and start their own fire. And once that happens, I'm anticipating everyone will finish around the same time. If they don't, we'll just have kids go grab more wood in the woods. And then afterwards, we'll summarize the activity with them. So I'll discuss, ask how the fire starting went, if they thought it was easier or harder than they were expecting, talk about some survival uses again, and really emphasize why this is useful for not just having like pleasureful campfires where you're having s'mores, but also they can be useful in the wilderness. And some of the survival uses of a campfire are warmth, cooking, boiling and sanitizing water, smoke signals, and bug prevention. And then finally I'll ask one thing they learned from the day, and I'll have everyone go around, and that could be how to start a fire, some safety, some uses of a fire, things like that. And then I'll thank them for coming, and they'll be on their way. And that's pretty much the entire activity. One important thing that I think I want to emphasize as well is safe fire clothing. So as you see here, I'm wearing this is a wool flannel, and wool does not burn very easily, so if an ember comes, it'll just kind of singe off of this. And that's important. So if I want to, the instructor should be wearing clothing that is not cotton specifically. It can be wool, it could be polyester, just some sort of non-flammable material. And yes, that is my activity plan. So thank you for watching.